Testing audio. All right. I think you all can hear me. Let's see here. All right, so it is Sunday here. Windy morning here in South Texas. And across the pond, on the other side of the Pacific in the Philippines, Category 4 Typhoon Fung-wong Uwan is now making landfall at this very moment across the Aurora coastline in Luzon. Near peak strength or just after peak strength. A couple hours ago, we did get an official upgrade to Category 4 status in terms of 1-minute sustained winds, 130 mile per hour winds in the eye wall, and a new low pressure of 943 millibars. So Fung-wong did reach peak intensity just before landfall. And we are now seeing that really any minute now. Radar is kind of being obstructed here by the high mountains on the island here in Luzon. But if I turn off radar there you can see that the satellite, now remember the satellite image is a little skewed. So it does show on satellite you've got the eye basically on shore now, but it's a little skewed because of the altitude. Because of the altitude angle of the actual satellite. So we rely on radar for official calls of landfall, which is when the center of the eye fully crosses on shore. Now we have incomplete radar data, like I said, because of the mountainous terrain. But nevertheless, you can pretty much estimate that landfall is just really a couple minutes away. I would say 3-4-ish minutes. An early comment here from Asuka saying, hey, I've been monitoring the typhoon. It looks like it's been moving way north. So yeah, to update, if you are carrying over from our previous live stream a couple hours ago, to update on what exactly has happened since then, we did see Typhoon Fung-wong taking a little bit of a south-heavy trend as she came in towards Luzon. But since then, in those hours since then, she has shifted all the way back up north, making landfall pretty much where she was initially anticipated to, right into Belair Bay. And that is what is occurring right now. We do have a very recent report here, so let me get to that. Because Belair Bay is where some of the worst storm surge and overall conditions was generally expected, right? So just 17 minutes ago, a report from James Reynolds, who's down there storm chasing the system live, that there's very little wind in Belair due to high terrain sheltering the town from the offshore flow, but that there are very large and battering waves. So apparently in Belair, the high terrain is actually kind of sheltering the town from what would normally be very strong winds. As a note, if you're wondering where the microphone interference is coming from, it's because we are outside here in South Texas. Cold front coming in. It's very cold here, but we are still moving it outdoors because it was a pretty cool morning, and I think a cool thing to do, and maybe start a little bit more often hosting these live streams, sometimes outdoors. The funny thing is here, it's pretty cold, and obviously in the Philippines it is not cold. It is very much tropical weather over there as this typhoon comes in. A typhoon that's never looked terribly impressive on satellite, but has a ton of power contained within her very, very large eye wall. So as we close in pretty much here on what I'm going to officially call landfall, we do have some level of good news for the Philippines. So there was a sense, there was an idea that maybe because Fung-wong started off with such a massive and large eye wall, right? Because she started off larger than average in terms of the size of her core winds, that did indeed, and there were some theories about this, that did indeed make it harder for her to strengthen as quickly and as robustly, because a larger system, right, just by the law of inertia, a larger system takes a lot more time and a lot more energy to kind of organize. And with Fung-wong here, I don't think it was impossible that she could have gone to a higher end Category 4 intensity. Many models were definitely still showing that for a long time, even after this system was kind of set up here with, and there we go, before this, when the system was set up with a large core. I don't think the environment was wouldn't have not allowed for strengthening to a higher intensity than what we saw here. But however way the inner mechanics, the structural trends of the system kind of progressed, we just did not see that sort of intensification. Fortunately, that was very good news to see that. But before I carry on, I'm going to call it here. Breaking news, guys. We officially have landfall, the long-awaited landfall of Typhoon Fung-wong in Luzon across the Aurora coast, basically into Aurora or Belair Bay. Bit of a messy presentation now as the system quickly deteriorates here, heading into the mountains of Luzon. Very steep terrain.
Post from Aptos_Biasa. Tropical Cyclone Bulletin NR13. Super Typhoon Uwan is about to make landfall over the central or northern portion of Aurora.
Yep, we're seeing landfall right now. If you are tuning in, feel free to comment and ask any questions. We'll do our best to answer them. So yeah, here we go. Direct landfall, and the system's really kind of imploding. Now we do have a new update here. Another one now, just now from James Reynolds. And he is saying it is getting a lot more rough here in Belair, all of a sudden. So now he's saying, even though initially it seemed like that first side of the eye wall that came on shore in Luzon didn't seem very strong, now James Reynolds is saying the waves and the winds are getting explosive in Belair Bay into near the landfall location. So that is definitely interesting. I don't know what's going on here, guys, exactly. This is sort of a situation where you have a very powerful tropical cyclone kind of imploding at landfall because of the high terrain, the very steep and jagged terrain of Luzon. So the structure is kind of imploding right at landfall, and that's causing some weird inconsistencies when we normally be looking at okay, where's the eye wall, where's the eye? Here is where you're going to see strong winds, even in a weaker storm. In this case, though, and this is not uncommon, right, when we see landfalling storms in Luzon, we see it sometimes in Taiwan too, not uncommon for the structure to really just kind of implode in a very rapid and short amount of time, and for the result to be a kind of a jumbled mess of a core where you have explosive downdrafts and big gusty portions instead of just consistent sustained winds. Think about something like Hurricane Idalia in 2023. She imploded. That was not due to land interaction. That was due to an eyewall replacement cycle. But Idalia imploded going into... Whoa! My lights are coming on me. Falling over. Wow. Wow. Let me stabilize that a little bit. Anyway, though, so you think about a hurricane like Idalia kind of imploding right at landfall. Instead of that sustained, consistent force of the eye wall kind of rotating through, it then instead became just a big jumbled mess of like where the remnant mesovortices were and kind of definitely inconsistent on where you got the strongest elements of the winds. Alex says appreciate for the live update. No problem. Pax Roman Art asking how does the data show rainfall across Luzon? We need to get some weights for the lighting in here. So that's a good question, Pax Roman Art. And here we go. Here are the estimated rainfall accumulations over the past only just couple of hours. These are not total, but across the past couple of hours here. Here are the estimated totals. And you can see a direct correlation between these heavier accumulations occurring inland. Hold on a second. Let me... So here are the rainfall accumulations, and they're directly correlating for sure with the higher terrain inland that's causing the orographic lift. That's where we're seeing the heavier accumulations. 5, 6, 9, and then look at this. Look at this really potent peak of rainfall here. Right over Tinok and Napotuyak. Here you're seeing a big concentrated area. So this is what is often a problem with the rainfall threat is you can have these isolated totals like this when you're dealing with mountainous terrain. It's really kind of sometimes random, bit of a lottery as to where the heaviest rainfall happens, and where that heaviest rainfall does occur, that is where you can see that isolated location. Maybe it's a bad landslide, maybe it's a bad flash flood. Either way, that's where you see that isolated location as some sort of isolated location potentially getting badly inundated or even destroyed. So I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but that's the kind of thing when we talk about rainfall. It's like where is the worst of it going to happen? We don't know, and it's because of this. Is because there's just impossible to pinpoint exactly where the worst of the rain is going to come down. So in metric units, the 220 millimeters plus here on this really torrential core right over Tinok. And then heavier accumulations too across the coast here, the Aurora coast, and into, where did I put that? All right, so yeah, so like I was saying, the Aurora coastline and going up into the Isabella coastline, we've seen some heavier accumulations here, over 100 millimeters, 120 millimeters. And then in and around San Jose, north of that, next to Santa Cruz, Massenlock, totals of 140 millimeters, 130. So definitely some heavy rainfall accumulations here across Luzon over just the last couple of hours. And those rain totals are only going to continue to rise here because of, look at all this heavy convection coming in as Fung-wong makes landfall. This is very cold, very deep convection. That is where some of the most torrential rain is coming in. Negative 114 Fahrenheit on some of these cloud tops. So these are really tall cloud tops of really powerful thunderstorms now moving inland over Luzon. And so that's where the rainfall totals are going to continue to climb, continue to get higher, exacerbated. Asuka with a good question asking, is it kind of a good thing that it had such a huge size for it to struggle to build up power because it seems so disorganized? Yeah, well, I mean, it's trade-off, right? I mean, what would have been worse? A more concentrated area of more extreme winds and higher destruction, like we saw with Typhoon Fung-wong, which made landfall. That storm made landfall almost the exact same area here in Luzon, and almost the exact same time of year, almost exactly 1 year ago now, a couple days from now. I think Fung-wong made landfall November 16th, 17th is when that storm came into the Philippines. So that Fung-wong was a tighter, more concentrated storm with a high-end Category 4 core, but that was more constrained to a narrower area. Here we have Fung-wong Uwan, which is she's a much larger storm with a huge sprawled-out wind field and a massive eye wall that is probably increasing the surge risk. Certainly, we've seen a lot of footage and a lot of talk about the wave heights and crashing on shore in Aurora and Isabella, and you can see why. Take a look at some of these wave height estimations just offshore, cresting at 42 feet potentially. That's near 13 meters. So, I mean, yeah, just look at how crazy these waves are, and you can see them flowing in towards Luzon. So, the east coast of Luzon has just been getting hammered with these huge swells and huge waves for a long time now. And here's why, because here's the direction, the flow of the winds. And you can see where that direct onshore flow is where you're going to see the highest storm surge, but also the greatest and most powerful swells. And that is a symptom of having such a large storm, right? Larger storms generate much more powerful swells. But is this better or worse than the hypothetical scenario that was originally presented, where Fung-wong has a narrower area of strong winds, but also intensifies to a much greater intensity? That really just kind of comes down to a question of whether or not we see some serious storm surge inundation here. We have seen serious storm surge inundation already in Catanduanes Island and other areas like in Calabarzon. So we've already seen some significant storm surge inundation and huge waves piling on shore and sweeping up these beaches. No doubt about it. But does that overall damage, even though it's more widespread, or I guess as a consequence of it being more widespread, does that exceed what would have happened if you had like a devastating path of destruction with a smaller high-end Cat 4? It's possible, but kind of a hypothetical that we can't really answer yet until we see the total aftermath of the storm. So in terms of what we've seen so far today, a lot of footage out of Catanduanes Island. An island that is now actually fully out of the storm. So for Catanduanes, Fung-wong is over. The storm has passed. They are getting into a clear night sky. But if we rewind the satellite loop and we take you through the journey Fung-wong has taken, now almost exactly 24 hours ago, is when Cat and Dwayne's Island right here first got into the eye wall, that enormous eye wall of Fung-wong. And there you go. So she passed very close by. The eye did not make landfall, but passed just off to the north. And there you can see the duration of time Cat and Dwayne's was in the eye wall. Lots of footage of how strong the winds were. Near whiteout conditions. But then also some pretty serious videos of storm surge as well. And then here's something really ominous. So here's the sheer size of Fung-wong. So we saw her pass through Cat and Dwayne's and leave a lot of damage there. Remains to be seen exactly how much. The footage is still coming in. We also saw a major flood near Legazpi City, a freshwater flood just outside of Legazpi City in the Albay area. So that's some of the more serious stuff we've seen up to this point. And then the huge swells like we've been talking about coming into Aurora and Isabella and Luzon. But there you can see just how large Fung-wong is, and her whole cloud canopy has almost engulfed the entirety of the Philippines, especially right at sunset. So really the only area of the whole archipelago that really the only area of the archipelago that wasn't covered, I guess, by the cloud canopy and the outflow canopy of Fung-wong was Mindanao, the southernmost island of the Philippines. Other than that, though, the whole island chain right there, as you can see, getting cloaked beneath that tropical cloud cover as Fung-wong has closed in. And we did see her upgraded to Category 4 status several hours ago. And we've had a decent amount of crazy footage definitely come out here. Multiple storm chasers on the ground, of course. So we're monitoring the reports from them. And looks like we have an update here.
Post from at Manila Bulletin. Houses in Barangay, District 3, San Miguel, Cataduanes, submerged in severe flood due to heavy rains caused by Super Typhoon Fung-wong on Sunday, November 9th. MDRRMO personnel with the Philippine Army immediately conducted a rescue operation to save residents in the affected area.
All right, so there you're hearing those reports, how homes inundated due to rising floodwaters. Emphasis is often put on a storm's wind, but it is the flooding and the water threat, whether from saltwater storm surge or freshwater flooding, that is always the greatest threat to life and property, so that's what we're monitoring the most. What a crazy view this is right before sunset here, because you can see those cloud tops near the eye wall there. Once this rewinds. So look at that. You can really see them shadowed in the sun. I'll pause it. Shadowed in the sun right at sunset. You can see those big hot towers. We did see a big burst of overshooting cloud tops and hot towers right before landfall here. Right as Fung-wong started to take another jog north. So this is something often we see when we're monitoring big storms coming in for landfall. It's always okay. Is the storm following the forecast track, or is it deviating north, south, east, west, whatever, right? And for a long time there, it did seem like Fung-wong was trending to the south of her forecast cone. But then, in these last few moments, she definitely took a northward jog and basically just course corrected. And honestly, that's something I see more often than not, right? I see that a lot when you have a storm coming in, starts to trend one way, starts to edge out on one side of the forecast cone. It's like, oh my gosh, it's changing course. And then right at the last minute, it course corrects, it changes, it deviates all the way back to what the initial forecast was. More often than not, I feel like that is the case. And that was certainly the case here with Fung-wong. Landfall, it did in fact incur into Belair Bay, not south of Belair Bay. For a while there, we were thinking that the landfall could occur south of that town, being Belair, but that has not been the case. The storm did come in to the north, or I guess directly into Belair Bay. And the reports are just flooding in here now, guys.
Post from @top_disaster. Strong waves due to Super Typhoon Uwan has struck the Nape, Isabela, Philippines.
Yeah, so we have had landfall here. Jordan Hall, storm chaser on the ground, reporting that he is now in the eye of Typhoon Fung-wong. As much as an eye as the system can have at this point. There you can see right at the point of landfall, the whole eye caving in, really imploding and collapsing due to the heavy terrain of Luzon. But there is still an eye, even though it has become cloud-filled. There is still an area of calm in the center. It's just not as calm as it used to be. And it is not super well defined. But Jordan Hall reporting that he is in the eye. So the eye is moving onshore now in Luzon. And some major reports of storm surge. And it really is being powered by the massive size of the waves here that is coming on shore now, along with Fung-wong. The wave heights are truly incredible here. Estimates of 40 feet, 13 meters. But what we're seeing with some of the powers of these Pacific Ocean swells slamming into the coastline, it is wild stuff. Hold on, guys. Posting an update here.
From @inquirer.net. Update. All overflow bridges in the province of Isabela are now impassable because of rising water levels.
Whoa.
Triggered by Uwan.
All right, guys, so I just posted this on my X feed at Backperch Crew. Just reposted an absolutely insane shot from Jordan Hall just now. It actually was footage from a few hours ago, okay? But it is insane. It is terrifying. So Jordan Hall captured major footage of these huge waves. Just absolutely massive waves just before sunset early. It's dark now in Luzon, but just before sunset earlier, Jordan Hall captured these huge waves crashing ashore in Luzon. I mean, this is just really, really, really scary stuff. Really, really, really scary stuff. So check that out because my goodness, that really is giving you a good representation of the power of some of these swells and waves and storm surge flooding that's happening. Holy cow. That is just crazy. These swells, and a lot of this footage I'm seeing of the swells, it's coming out from a few hours ago, so I would bet that it's stronger and more powerful now. Holy cow! Oh, man. Disaster news, guys. Huge storm surge flooding. This is not your typical storm surge flooding, or at least the typical idea of it. You know, normally when we think about surge, oftentimes we're looking at something that, kind of creeps in through the beach dunes, flows through the streets, starts rising up over a couple hours, and then eventually maybe during the peak of the storm you get some more violent wave action. No, I mean, these are coming in huge swells, this storm surge flooding. Huge violent swells. Wow. More reports out of Albay, which is near Legazpi City. So we're getting reports now as the storm pulls away from this area, from the Bickle region and Catanduanes. We're starting to get more reports of exactly what happened. And there was definitely a major flash flood that occurred in the Albay area near Legazpi City. Definitely something went on there with major freshwater flooding. Man, and then now Jason H., another storm chaser. I think he was in the same area as Jordan Hall was whenever that happened. But I think this might be the same wave. But yeah, he's got footage of this. What is that building? Love La Sunshine, some building that says Love La Sunshine. But I mean, this incredibly massive swell literally just.
From ASCII News. Super Typhoon Uwan makes landfall in Dingalan, Aurora. Super Typhoon has made landfall in Dingalan, Aurora as of 9:10, according to Pagasa.
Okay, they're saying we officially have landfall. No surprise there. Man. Huge waves also earlier on the coast of Barangay in Catanduanes. Yeah, so we have some big-time coastal storm surge. And violent coastal storm surge at that. Definitely getting tons of widespread reports of that. No question that we have seen some serious stuff in the way of storm surge. And like I said, a big component of that is the massive wave heights that are being picked up here based on satellite estimates and buoy estimates. These are the waves coming into Luzon, and with crests like this, it's easy to see how the swells are getting to be so enormous. Here's your real-time wind, the flow of the winds here from Fung-wong, showing that this quadrant right here in northern Aurora and Isabella, those coastlines in Luzon, showing the direct area of where the onshore flow is. And that is indeed where we're seeing the most violent and the most sudden swells of storm surge, where those winds are pushing directly on shore. And if you go look at that footage now, and I've reposted it on my X feed at Backbridge Crew, you go look at that footage, and all I'm going to say is that is a lesson if you ever go storm chasing, or if you're ever near the ocean at any point when it is getting riotous, we'll say, to never turn your back on the ocean if you're standing in proximity. So if you go see that footage, I mean, that is really the lesson to take away from that. Never turn your back on the ocean, because that's how fast something can become deadly. I mean, the waves I'm seeing in some of those storm chaser videos, I mean, that could have actually been, I mean, hopefully it wasn't deadly. I don't think it was in that particular instance, obviously. But that could very well have been deadly, right? I mean, if you're standing there, you're not paying attention, and all of a sudden, boom, a wave just comes crashing in, sweeps you off your feet. Wow, wind is getting strong here, non-tropically though. Streaming here from South Texas, and it's very chilly this morning. It's cold front has come in. It's windy. It's what the microphone's catching, and in stark contrast to the the tropical warmth and the extreme moisture content of this typhoon there in the Philippines, over here in Texas, where it's morning instead of evening, it is windy, cold, and dry. You can see how blue the sky is behind me. Very, very dry out here. But yeah, so if you're just tuning in, thank you for watching our live coverage of Typhoon Fung-wong's landfall into the Philippines. Feel free to comment or ask any questions. We'll do our best to answer any questions you have. Radar giving us an approximate idea radar giving us an approximate idea of that eye coming in. Now, this isn't a super clear radar presentation for multiple reasons. One, because the radar beams are getting miscellaneously blocked by the mountains of Luzon, but also, of course, because Fung-wong is imploding here at the moment of landfall. Okay, Josh Morgerman now reporting that the strongest winds yet are now occurring in Belair, which is here, and that they are blowing offshore. So it looks like Belair, looks like maybe the western quadrant or just the whole western half in general of Fung-wong's eye wall kind of deteriorated there before landfall. Kind of fell apart, I think, looks like, because I'm not seeing much in the way of reports and footage to suggest that that initial eye wall that initial half of eye wall rolling on shore did much of anything in the way of winds. And now as the backside of the eye wall starts to come in, now we're seeing the footage of what you would normally expect in a major hurricane equivalent typhoon.
Post from GMA News. Several communities in Albay were flooded due to storm surge or tidal waves even before Super Typhoon Uwan made landfall there. As early as the night of November 8th, the sea reportedly nearly reached the level of the wharf in Barangay Albay. As Typhoon Uwan approached the province on November 9th, the waves grew even larger.
Right. So it does seem that the backside of the eye wall is possessing much stronger winds than the initial side did. And you can kind of see that here. You know, this is a rough estimation of where the strongest winds are, of course, but you can kind of see that. You can kind of see where there are much higher values here on the eastern half than there are on the western half, even taking into account the terrain blocking the winds here. Holy moly. We do have a wealth of storm chasers there down on the ground, so we have a really good idea of what's happening here as it happens. That's not always the case. You know, sometimes we're tracking storms making landfall in rural or remote areas where there aren't many people, let alone professional storm chasers. So we do have a very good idea of what's happening. And of course, can't stress enough that when you see this amount of convection flowing now inward across the entirety of Luzon, major freshwater flash flooding is a serious concern. That can be life-threatening. That can be absolutely deadly, as well as the isolated potential for landslides too. All right, so as we hit 8 a.m. here in South Texas, 10 p.m. local time in the Philippines. I'm going to post the landfall update here real quick on my X feed. Looks like we have another update coming in, so give me a second here, guys.
From @weather_Manila. Latest rain and wind projections for tonight and tomorrow. Uwan, still a lot of rain and gusty / stormy winds all over Luzon. Stay safe.
Alvin Ray commenting, hello, raining here in Manila. Very gusty, strong winds right now. Okay, so there's a real-time report from Manila. Now, there was a brief concern that Manila might get a little close to the eye wall, a little too close for comfort earlier when we were seeing Fung-wong kind of trend to the south of her forecast. But as mentioned previously at the beginning of this broadcast, Fung-wong has course-corrected, taken a northern jog now over the last couple of hours and made landfall directly into Belair Bay instead of to the south of the bay like we were thinking might happen for a second. So Manila, fortunately, will not be getting the eye wall at all at this point. Still some strong winds and raining, obviously, as Alvin pointed out, but fortunately for Manila, nowhere near the strongest and most severe of impacts Fung-wong has to offer here today. So hold on here, guys, as I post this landfall update. Footage pouring in everywhere. Oh, man. It's a big, very large, and very impactful storm here. Not the strongest of typhoons, thankfully, but still very, very impactful. Affecting a lot of people across Luzon here tonight. Tonight for the Philippines, this morning here for anyone watching in the U.S., specifically here in South Texas. Huge plume of very intense convection and torrential rainfall now moving inland all across Luzon.
Cyclone, Typhoon Fung-wong in Baylor, Philippines. We are in the left eyewall and the strongest winds have been blowing offshore.
Here's some of the rainfall accumulations in the mountainous interior of Luzon over the last couple of hours. Alrighty. Okay. Alright, so finally done with that here. Alvin Ray commenting this typhoon is moving fast. Yeah, that is an element, another element of good news for Fung-wong is that she is not a slow crawler that's going to be dumping rain all day. She is going to be moving along. So that at least is good. And also, just in general, we've had the good news that Fung-wong did not intensify as quickly as she could have, and a lot of that was due to the sheer size of her inner core that she really set up. I was very surprised to see such a large inner core so early on, and what that causes, it's basically the laws of inertia. It's just basic physics. A larger storm can take a lot more time and a lot more energy to reach the same level of wind speed that a smaller storm can. For Fung-wong, she didn't have a whole lot of time before making landfall in the Philippines, so she did not have enough time to get that really large core really roaring, really going into a higher end Category 4 intensity, which seemed like a totally realistic prospect for quite a long time. But fortunately, that did not come to fruition. She still did peak. She did manage to peak as a Category 4 storm. But it was low in Category 4 intensity at 130 miles per hour. I think she made landfall. I don't think she made landfall at that intensity. I think probably just below that, right? I'm estimating somewhere around here, Category 3, 120 miles per hour. And she's going to continue to weaken as she crosses through Luzon. That is normal. But even though her large size did reduce how strong she could get before landfall, it did mean that more people were to be affected across the northern Philippines at large. And it also is increasing, I think, not just how widespread, but also how violent the waves and the swells and the storm surge are that we're seeing. Because larger storms, there's a very direct correlation with larger storms really being able to churn the ocean up a lot more than maybe even a smaller storm that's of a higher intensity. And we're definitely seeing the results of that with all this crazy storm chaser footage coming out along the Aurora coast of massive waves sweeping across beaches, easily crashing over seawalls and causing some localized inundation. Looks like very severe flooding in San Miguel, Catanduanes Island, also in the city of Virac in Catanduanes Island. For context, Catanduanes Island's down here. So Catanduanes is now outside of the storm entirely, but earlier they did get into the eye wall of Fung-wong for a pretty good amount of time. That Category 3 eye wall. Near whiteout winds were reported. Very heavy rainfall, and also significant storm surge there as well. So Catanduanes has had some pretty severe flooding, and that's where some of the worst damage so far has taken place.
Knee-deep flooding in Calbayog tomorrow due to the continuous rain brought by Typhoon Uwan this Sunday to Monday night.
Lee and Ho asking about what I think he means is the Manila area, the general Manila area. And down there, we're not expecting... I'm not sure. I think that's a typo. But if he is referring to the Manila area, Manila, luckily, for them. Not getting the eye wall, not getting anything close to that. They are getting the outer rain bands, maybe the outer, very outer frills, the outer edges of Typhoon Fung-wong's central dense overcast, but they are missing the worst of the storm. Doesn't mean flooding can happen in some areas in the city, but they are definitely missing the worst of the storm. The worst of Fung-wong right now is carving a path straight through Luzon. On the Aurora, but also the Isabella coast lines as well. Leon Ho asking northern of Belair. Yeah, so just north of Belair is certainly where we're seeing some of the more serious waves and storm surge inundation. If I pull up the wave map again, here you can see that, so Belair Bay down here, and then just to the north of that is where the most massive and most violent waves are taking place. And that is because this area is where the strongest onshore flow of winds from the typhoon is taking place. When it comes to storm surge, all that matters is the angle of the landfall, the type of coastline, the shape of it you're dealing with at the point of landfall, near the point of landfall, but then also where exactly are the winds pushing water onshore, and then where winds actually pulling water back out into the ocean. Right now in Belair, actually, where we worried they could face some of the worst storm surge, out in Belair, it looks like they're actually having a negative storm surge maybe now because the winds are pulling offshore.
As of 9:40 p.m., Aurora, Philippines, is experiencing strong winds and heavy rain as Typhoon Fung-wong impacts the area.
Attacks the area. Leon Ho asking, so we can't have Fung-wong stop, actually. I'm not sure what you mean by that. So you're going to have to clarify on that one. I'm not sure what you mean on that one. Here on the winds, you can see they're really encompassing the entirety of Luzon at this point. And there you can see the point, the approximate location of Fung-wong's eye, now fully onshore. Another report from Josh Morgerman saying things are really hairy down in Belair as they get the backside of the eye wall. Oh man, radar is just useless here with this storm. This is a messy storm at this point. Fung-wong was never terribly impressive structurally, even though she was a very potent and powerful storm beneath the cloud tops. But now with her whole core kind of imploding, it's very hard to tell which structural pieces are where. She's basically like a jigsaw puzzle now coming undone at this point. Well, the storm's not going to stop, Lee. It is going to keep going. There's nothing that can stop Fung-wong's forward motion here. So she will keep moving. But, I mean, yeah, certainly north of Belair is where the worst of the storm surge is occurring, or at least the worst storm surge potential is occurring. Doesn't mean that whole coastline is super vulnerable to storm surge, so it'll come down to which pockets are the most low-lying. Another way to visualize what we're seeing here is this location. These locations right here. They're getting the maximum storm surge potential that that they're ever going to have at this point. Now with Fung-wong making landfall. So these locations in the Philippines, this is where, really, for the whole height of the storm, have to imagine it's happening right now, the maximum storm surge potential is. Several videos coming out of Belair now of some of the stronger wind footage that we've seen up to this point. Oh, and also, guys, if you didn't see that exceptionally insane video of the bridge, of that suspension bridge in Kamalagan, if you didn't see that, you definitely have to, because that's going to terrify you. It's going to make you never want to go on one of those bridges again. Also of note, Jordan Hall mentioned that when he got into the eye of Fung-wong, that he could see a few stars and frequent lightning in the eye wall. Yeah, I noticed that the lightning. I noticed some lightning flashes in the eye wall on James Reynolds' stream earlier when he was streaming on the ground in Belair Bay, and so I saw some of those lightning strikes. I was like, man, is that from the eye wall? And that appears to be the case. But Jordan Hall did mention that he did see some stars in the eye of Fung-wong before it completely caved in and became completely cloud-filled. That was a little over an hour ago when we had the official confirmation of landfall. So that's interesting. Radar data is very loosey-goosey because of the mountains. So it's not the greatest. But we saw enough to be able to call landfall relatively soon. All right. So continuing to monitor all the reports coming out of Luzon. And now begins the long process of the typhoon actually trekking across this island, the northernmost island of the Philippines. And for inland areas, even if you don't get winds that rise to the level of damaging, I guess, you still have to worry about, and this is obviously specific to anyone's particular location, but you definitely have to worry about flash flooding and stuff like that, because this is a ton of convection here coming over Luzon. It was something I mentioned on my live stream earlier, our previous live stream, about the kind of interesting contrast that the Philippines has when it comes to these tropical cyclones. On the one hand, the Philippines are hit with typhoons and more powerful typhoons on average than any other country in the world by far. So they're ready for it. They know how to prepare. A lot of their structures are very well built and able to withstand strong typhoon winds. I would say especially in some areas in Luzon. So they're used to it. They're prepared. They're ready for it most of the time. Especially lower end, I would say, major hurricane equivalent typhoons like Fung-wong here, where even though the winds are strong, they're not, terribly strong or devastating or catastrophic in their own right. But on the other hand, there are still, nevertheless, many communities in the Philippines that are very, very vulnerable to natural disasters, but particularly to flooding. Oftentimes we'll see a big Category 4 typhoon, for instance, slam into Luzon with some very powerful winds, but either, the storm hits a rural area or, again, just hits a community that's ready for it and prepared, right? I mean, Catanduanes Island alone, there's a ton of structures there that can withstand Category 4 force winds relatively easily because of the frequency with which they're hit with storms of that intensity. So you'll see a big Category 4 typhoon hit Luzon, and it turns out to be not terribly bad in terms of loss of life and property damage. And then the next day, you'll see a tropical storm, a seemingly harmless tropical storm, kind of meander over the wrong place at the wrong time, dumping too heavy a rainfall and too vulnerable a location, and you'll see hundreds of fatalities. And that's unfortunately what has just happened. The thing about Fung-wong hitting the Philippines here today is that only 5 days ago, we had the landfall of Typhoon Kalmegi, also known as Tino in the Philippines. That's his Filipino name. Typhoon Kalmegi on the southern side of the Philippines. And while Kalmegi was nowhere near as strong as Fung-wong right now, he proved to be absolutely devastating. So Kalmegi became a Category 2 typhoon. Came in like this, made landfall initially here in Leyte. Then the system traveled over here and made a second landfall. Okay, so here's the location of the first landfall. And then Kalmegi came over here. Remember, this was only 5 days ago, and made a second landfall here, roughly, Cebu Island. And then the core, and then the center tract over there eventually made 6 landfalls total across the Philippines. But that was not the big story. The big story occurred in Cebu City, which is this massive city right here. but particularly in Talisay City, which is kind of incorporated in the greater Cebu City area. So that's basically where Talisay City is. And what happened was all of that heavy convection, that core convection with all that torrential rainfall, not unlike what we're seeing here with Fung-wong, again, not saying that you're going to see anything like Kalmegi, occur again here with Fung-wong. I'm not saying that at all. A very tragic set of circumstances has to come together at the same moment at the same moment for that to happen. But basically what we had here was, here are these mountains to the to the west of the city. So here's your rural, very jagged, very mountainous terrain, very steep rain-forested cliffs. And what happened was, all the rain came down across the mountains, as it typically does, typically where the heaviest rain accumulates. And then it all flowed down into the Menanga River, flowing out here. And what happened there was, once the Menanga River overflowed, all of these tightly packed houses and homes and structures and people in Talisay City, so many buildings right on top of the Menanga River, when that river overflowed, burst its banks, and swept through, any home on that riverfront was literally just washed out into the sea. And here's a little bit of a clearer view here. I can't illustrate on this map, can't draw on it, but can give you a more specific idea. So this was where Typhoon Kalmegi came in, and the rainfall over these cliffs, these very steep and winding cliffs, all funneled into the Menanga River, which emptied down directly into Talisay City. And right there is where you can see the problem where the problem arose. In Talisay City, you have all these buildings packed up right against this usually benign river. And then all of a sudden, in a moment, huge flash flood, all of these buildings were wiped out, basically. All of these buildings that were close to the river literally washed out into the ocean. And it's tragically been devastating. With 244 fatalities confirmed and another 137 plus people labeled as missing. And almost all of that, obviously there was some flood damage in other areas affected by Kalmegi and some fatalities, but the vast majority occurred in Talisay City, Cebu City, yes, but mostly Talisay City, where the Menanga River literally washed anything close to it, anything close to the riverside, washed it all out into the sea. So an absolutely tragic, heartbreaking, and devastating occurrence there with Kalmegi. Even though that was a weak Category 2, or not a weak, but a weaker storm, right? We don't usually think of Category 2s as, oh my gosh, that's so scary. But a perfect example of how many places in the Philippines are still so very vulnerable to inland flooding and rain-related impacts, which is why I am worried about that with Luzon, because now you see all this convection literally sitting dead center over Luzon. I mean, all these places, Tarlac City, Camiling, San Carlos, San Jose, Dipakalu, Lao, Lamut, Santiago, Tabuk, Cabagan, all these places. We go to all these different towns and population centers under this very heavy cloud of rainfall at the moment. Oh, that's interesting. So we did get the official landfall strength from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. Winds down to 115 miles per hour. And the pressure actually going to put that lower, not because the storm was intensifying, but because the stated pressure was a little bit lower than I was expecting. So the winds coming down very quickly from 130 mile per hour, 1 minute sustained winds at peak intensity to 115 miles per hour, which is borderline Category 3, barely a Category 3. And that is thanks to that big implosion, that big structural implosion there in the final few hours right before landfall. Fung-wong's eye wall really, especially on the western side, really caving in, and that's why the winds were reduced so dramatically there right before the storm struck shore. But the pressure did not go down quite as much, and that makes sense sometimes when you look at a storm that rapidly implodes. When you have the whole eye wall structure collapse, as we just saw here with Fung-wong, due directly to that steep topography, that intense land and grading land interaction, which is introducing a ton of friction to the core of strongest winds. That causes those sustained winds to come down really dramatically in a very short amount of time. But since the eye and since the low pressure center is still kind of over water, even half over water at the point of landfall, that doesn't weaken quite as much as the winds. You know what I'm saying? Guess that's what I'm trying to communicate, is that when you have situations like this, normally we see the pressure kind of correlate with the winds when we see rapid weakening when a storm makes landfall. But in this case, we're seeing actually the winds weaken faster than the pressure, because the pressure is not being, the sea level pressure, the low level pressure vortex is not being impacted by the mountainous terrain. It's the winds in the eye wall structure itself that is, and that's why you're seeing the winds come down so dramatically. But the pressure is still staying at a very intense 945 millibars. And since that was the landfall, since that was the official landfall intensity, and that was 2 hours ago now, I would actually bet that Fung-wong is more a Category 2 system at this point. But I'll keep that Category 3 status there for a moment here, just to show that that was the landfall, intensity. But I think it will take kind of my own estimate and lower it down to Category 2 pretty soon. Also of note, we just had a huge, I guess as of note to the location I'm streaming from, we just had a huge cloud of dust I don't know if you were able to see that, but a huge cloud of dust just went through. That was crazy. Okay. All right, going to look again to see how, what other kinds of reports. What other kind of reports we're getting from near the landfall location and from earlier areas that were severely impacted, such as Cat and Duane's Island. Spinny's back here, so let's see what he has to say.
From Philippine News Agency. The seawater overflows at the Baywalk in Lingayen town, Pangasinan, at about 10 p.m. Sunday, as Super Typhoon Fung-wong plows through the landmass of northern Luzon after making landfall in Aurora province. There were also reports of fallen trees and damaged houses in some parts of the province.
So there you have that from Philippine News Agency. Fung-wong plowing through Luzon. Reposting now on my XFeed Outback Perch Crew footage from Cat and Dwayne's Island earlier. A lot of the same, but it doesn't get any less insane watching it. Massive swells and waves crashing onto these kind of low barrier seawalls here in the northern Philippines and a lot of these coastal areas in the northern Philippines. Massive tidal surge earlier when the eye wall of Fung-wong was raking the island of Cat and Dwayne's. Nearly 1 million people have been evacuated in the Philippines from the path of this storm. Here you can see where the low pressure, that low atmospheric pressure at sea level, down at those very intense levels near the center of Fung-wong. With the eye now moving across Luzon. I expect that locations in northern Aurora and Isabela are still facing a lot of those massive tidal surges because of the onshore push there. You can see the direction and the flow of the winds. It did appear, and continues to appear, that the backside of Fung-wong's eye wall is more intense than the front side, or in other words, the eastern half of the eye wall is more intense than the western half, because the western half seemingly imploded to almost nothing at landfall, whereas the reports are from near the landfall location in Bel Bay that the eastern half, the secondary side, the back side of the eye wall, is producing much stronger winds than the initial impact. There was massive flooding earlier in Virac, the city of Virac, in Catanduanes Island. MG saying, hey, good morning from New Hampshire. New Hampshire, right? Did Uwan really get bigger? Yes, MG. Well, I mean, Uwan more or less kind of stayed the same size here. But yes, a very large, a very massive typhoon here, which is causing a lot of problems, especially with the tidal surges and the waves, because large storms can really get the ocean churning in a powerful way. Let's see here what this update is.
Post from Alcoholic One. Massive wave and tidal surge slammed into the coastal area of Gigmoto, Catanduanes, and Philippines this morning. Super Typhoon Fung-wong has made landfall in Dingalan, Aurora.
Woo! It is chilly out here. Asuka commenting from Tarlac, saying, here in Tarlac we had very strong winds before the landfall. Now we have no winds and just little rain. So this is kind of what I'm talking about with the randomness at this point of where the heaviest rain and the strongest winds in Typhoon Fung-wong are right now, because Luzon has just completely messed the system up. Completely destroyed it. Particularly the coastal Sierra Madre mountains as well. Those long have served as kind of a destructive barrier to typhoons making landfall across Luzon's eastern coast, which is, of course, is where the vast majority of typhoons make landfall. And so Asuka saying that right before landfall, so really at this moment, I think, qualifying is right before landfall. It looks like Tarlac City was indeed getting hit with a very robust rain band right before landfall. Now, at this moment, it looks, see, like, this is the problem. I'm trying to tell where is what, because on satellite, the convection is as cold, as intense as ever directly over Tarlac, but Asuka saying no, the winds and the rain have subsided. Just a little rain and basically no winds. And so you really just cannot go by satellite imagery at all at this point. It's super random as to actually where those torrential rains and especially where the strongest winds are at this point. It's all a jumbled mess. Mountains of Luzon have completely destroyed this system. Alvin Ray asking, how strong is the typhoon's eyewall? 2 hours ago at landfall, the official landfall intensity from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center were sustained winds of 115 miles per hour, though I would argue that would only have been possible on the backside or eastern half of the eyewall, not the front side, because all reports from the ground indicate that the front side of the eyewall was pretty weak and demolished before it even, structurally demolished before it even got to shore in Luzon. But that's the official estimate anyway right now. So 115 mile per hour sustained winds at landfall, though they are probably already much lower than that. I'm just showing you what the last update was from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, but pretty soon I'm probably going to throw in my own estimate of how strong the winds are based on the continued weakening trends we're seeing. And here is another common feature we see in landfalling typhoons over Luzon, but also over Taiwan. Those are two of the more mountainous areas in the world. Oh, well, also the west coast of Mexico, the Pacific coast of Mexico, they have really insane mountains over there too. And so when they get a powerful landfalling major hurricane over there, you see it as well. You see this kind of line, this line of lighter colors, of the lighter convection? Those are some of those big-time mountains in Luzon at play there, disrupting the flow of the thunderstorms across the island. So that sort of linear, weird kind of feature there, certainly not part of the storm's rotation. That is all part of the fierce land interaction that is right now, as we speak, tearing Fung-wong apart, piece by piece, thunderstorm by thunderstorm. Amazingly, storm chaser Jordan Hall got in the dead center of Fung-wong's eye at landfall, and even though the eye looked very cloud-filled and ragged at the point it came across the shore, he actually did say he could see stars peeking through the eye, that very large eye of Fung-wong's at landfall. He said he could see stars, and also it was very calm. So the eye held on enough. Yeah, I held on enough for you to still see all the way up through it, to tell the difference between it and the surrounding eye wall, which can become increasingly harder to do when mountains turn typhoons like this into just one big mixing bowl of convection. No longer retaining that super robust eye wall structure. Wow, so it looks like we got quite a few people watching. If you're just joining us, thank you for tuning in to our continued coverage of Typhoon Fung-wong's landfall over Luzon, plowing through the island here. All sorts of different places getting heavy convection. Thank you for commenting, asking questions, and of course liking the stream and sharing the stream as well. We appreciate all of that very much. Helps us get the word out to as many people as possible, which is our mission here at Back Perch Weather.
Philippine News Agency. Uwan is here. Fierce winds and torrential rains pound Dingalan, Aurora on Sunday. Super Typhoon Uwan, the 21st cyclone to hit the country this year, made landfall in the province at 9:10 p.m.
Did that say 25th? I'm not sure about 25 exactly, but this has been a very high, and I mean, if you want to talk about the overall season, it's been in the West Pacific. This is the kind of season it's been in the West Pacific here in 2025. Sort of an unusual year, not 21st. 21. So we have, whoa! Hold on a second, guys. Wow. Big time winter winds here in South Texas. Whoa! Oh. I am so glad everything did not collapse. There was a pillow on the other side of this table, and it just flew across the table. It is like a dust storm out here at this point. All right, we're back to sanity. So here are all the tracks of the storms in the West Pacific in 2025, and it's been interesting because it's been a below average year for typhoons in terms of intensity, right? In terms of having a lot of powerful typhoons, we have not, and we've only had one Category 5 typhoon, being Regasa Nando, made landfall over the Babayan Islands of the Philippines earlier this year. Alvin Ray said, well, that was loud. Yeah, I don't know how loud that was on a microphone, so I'll have to go back and listen to that. That was crazy just a second ago. But yeah, so only one Category 5 typhoon, being Regasa. And we've had a couple Cat 4s, obviously. Fung-wong here, Category 4. Neoguri, a Category 4. And then that one other one, Long, Category 4. Oh, here we go again. But overall, it's been a very low-intensity season for the West Pacific, a basin we're used to seeing Cat 5s, Cat 4s just, you know, popped out like popping out candy like a Pez dispenser. That's what it feels like sometimes with tropical meteorology in the West Pacific. It's just like one after another. It's so easy to generate powerful storms over there, it feels like. But not this year. It's been a struggle. However, despite that, it's been a very high impact season in terms of landfall. So we've had a ton of landfalling storms. It's just that they've been weaker and shorter lived than on average. And if I zoom in here, so this is not, by the way, counting. This is not counting Typhoon Fung-wong's track here, obviously. But look at how many storms have hit the Philippines this year. So not a lot of powerful ones. Regasa did make landfall over the Babian Islands as a 165 to 175 mile per hour Category 5, depending on who you ask. But the only good thing about that is that the Babian Islands don't have a huge population centers. Now, they were totally destroyed. And, you know, here's an image of Typhoon Regasa, the most powerful storm of the West Pacific in 2025, and the other one of the other two major impacts, I would say, like major tropical cyclone impacts the Philippines have experienced this year. This was Regasa, and we were live for this storm's whole landfall over the Babian Islands, which are just north. Here are the Babian Islands, just north of Luzon. And it was Babian here, that's where the first landfall occurred with Regasa, and then the second landfall occurred here in Calayan. Both of these islands, by the way, have been totally defoliated. Both of these islands have had their natural habitats totally destroyed. And I can pull that up if you guys want to see it. But yeah, so here was Regasa earlier. Again, hands down the most powerful storm of the year, and probably going to end up finally as the most powerful West Pacific typhoon of the year, of 2025. But Regasa, too, kind of an interesting thing here. Regasa, obviously, magnitudes more powerful. Officially, 905 millibar peak intensity based on the Japan Meteorological Agency estimate. I personally think Regasa was sub 900 millibars. I believe that with a high degree of confidence, too. But either way, Regasa had a very large eye. Look at that. This is just an incredible image from the International Space Station. This is not from Fung-wong. This was from Regasa earlier in late September. But some of the images of that storm captured from the International Space Station were really all-timers. Definitely some of the more incredible ISS images of the year. So that's how insane Regasa looked. And then on standard satellite imagery, no less unbelievable. And this was very close to the moment, really at the moment, where the storm made landfall over Babian and Calayan. And I'll show you what happened there. Some controversy with Typhoon Regasa's peak intensity. Joint Typhoon Warning Center noted a 1-minute sustained wind peak intensity of 165 miles per hour. Pagasa, the Philippine Weather Authority, estimated 180 miles per hour. I kind of take the middle road and go 175. for Regasa. That's just my guess. But here's what Regasa did. Just want to show you guys this. To Babayan Island. That was Regasa made landfall on September 21st, 22nd. With sustained winds of around 175 miles per hour. And that's what he did to the island of Babayan. So even though these satellite images aren't super high quality, even though they're kind of, how you say it, pixelated. You can see that the lush tropical vegetation there on this tiny island was mostly stripped away. So that is high-end Category 5 major Category 5 damage when you see the natural environment suffer like that. Whoa, here we go again. I'm not kidding you guys. I know you can't see it, but I'm not kidding when I say it's like an actual dust storm out here when that wind picks up. And then here's an image of Kalayan, the second landfall of Regasa, and much of the same, tons of defoliation and destruction of the natural habitat. So that's what occurred over there. Oh, and here, I'll show you this picture too. So here was, it's now nighttime in the Philippines, but here was a few hours ago at sunset. This was the image we were looking at, and it is just unbelievable. So right at sunset, the entire cloud shield, when you include the outflow, the cirrus outflow on the southern end of Fung-wong, basically had blanketed the entire country of the Philippines. And it's not too often something like that happens. It really requires a very large and very expansive type of storm to do something like this, to literally cover the entirety of the Philippines in his or her cloud cover. So that is one of the crazier images, definitely, of the year in the tropics. And something that I'm sure people in the Philippines will be talking about for a while, this storm in general. But yeah, so you had Regasa make landfall over the Babayan Islands at Category 5 intensity, but that's really the only powerful storm, other than Fung-wong here. But of course, Fung-wong nowhere near a Category 5 intensity, kind of an eroding Category 3 at landfall. And yet, despite that, the Philippines have sustained major damage this year. I think worse than any other storm they experienced last year. And they had many more powerful typhoon landfalls last year than they did this year. I mean, multiple majors, right?
At nightfall, the wind brought by Super Typhoon Uwan being experienced in Santiago Isla, which is currently under signal number 4, is growing even stronger.
Okay, thanks for that update. So, the Philippines, for the second straight year, last year it was when they were hit with 4 typhoons in an 11-day time frame, which is obviously unmatched. That's obviously an insane meteorological event that we definitely hope does not repeat itself. But even though we're not seeing 4 typhoon landfalls in 10 to 11 days, and of course many of those landfalls were of category 4 strength, right? You had Yinsing, Manyi, Usagi. But a lot of these storms have caused significant impacts. Like Komei over here caused significant impacts. Komei was a very unusual Category 1 typhoon because she actually came in and made landfall on the west side of Luzon. That is very rare. Super, super unusual storm. And then you had Bualoy, this track right here, go through Samar Island. And Bualoy caused a good deal of damage to many places, despite being a high-end tropical storm, low-end Category 1. And then, of course, it was Kalmegi all the way down here that caused really a localized catastrophe in Cebu City, with the 244 fatalities and 137 additional people labeled as missing there. And now you're seeing Fung-wong, and we'll see, hopefully her damage and casualty total is nowhere near what Kalmegi caused just 5 days ago. Literally just 5 days ago. I mean, this is insane. We're already talking about another typhoon landfall in the Philippines. But it doesn't matter because there have just been so many different damaging storms for this country, really now back-to-back years, and it's peaking out in early to mid-November is when we're having a lot of these surges of activity. Asuka commenting a few hours ago, the eye looked like it was heading for Tarlac head on, so I got to pack my computer, monitors, and equipment. I'm thankful it moved up north, but I'm still praying for my brothers up there. Yeah, that was very smart. Good preparation on your part, Asuka. It did indeed, for a long time, look like the core of Fung-wong was going to go directly over Tarlac City in that general area because of that southern trend we were monitoring earlier. But that did not come to fruition, luckily for Tarlac City. And that's why you always just got to keep monitoring the trends, right?
Tropical Cyclone Bulletin Aurora 14. Destructive typhoon force winds continue to affect northern and central Luzon as Uwan traverses the Luzon landmass.
That's why you pay attention, stay prepared, right? Because things change fast. And it's always better to be prepared than not prepared. For any case. Just like that. All right, so now here is a very informal back perch weather specific update here. But I am just through my own powers of observation because this is a real-time event we're watching here. Lowering the winds to 110 miles per hour and lessening the pressure gradient to 950 millibars and kind of declaring this Typhoon Fung-wong here a Category 2 storm at this point because of the rapid weakening that we're seeing as the storm plows through Luzon. And again, this 110 miles per hour is probably very generous at this point because the very mountainous terrain of Luzon is going to really tear apart those sustained winds very, very quickly. But that's what we'll go with for now on the high end. As you can see, Fung-wong, a very large storm. The 21st or 22nd tropical system overall to affect the Philippines in just this year alone. That is insane. That is crazy land. Philippines just cannot catch a break. And obviously showing this graphic, which are all the different tracks of all the different tropical systems that have affected the Philippines this year. With the worst being Calmegi down here, and the flooding he caused in Cebu Island, but then also Typhoon Regasa up here over the Babion Islands, which are just north of Luzon. And so for the second straight year, a big time flurry of typhoons and tropical activity having serious impacts across the Philippines. Now this year, it is what it is. Right now it's Calmegi and then Fung-wong in short succession, both causing some major damage. But here, this satellite loop is from last year and almost this exact same time of year. So this satellite loop covers from November 7th, which was yesterday or 2 days ago, and goes up until November 18th. So an 11-day time frame. This is an 11-day satellite loop here, and it shows the 4 typhoon landfalls in the Philippines within that 11-day time frame. Absolutely nuts. Here it is. If you live in the Philippines, you remember this very well, in all likelihood. And the other thing, too, is that most of the landfalls, all except one of the landfalls, right? So this is 5 landfalls, 4 storms. And 4 of those 5 landfalls occurred in Luzon. So Luzon just like, man, one after another, one after another. So this was Yinsing, making landfall Category 4 intensity right here. Then came Torji, Category 1 storm. Then came Usagi, Category 4, weakened down a little bit before making landfall. And then here was Manyi, made landfall over Catanduanes Island as a high in Category 4, and then re-intensified very rapidly and made landfall as a high in Category 4, boom, into Luzon. So this was last year at that time. Almost the same time of year, early to mid-November. Wow. And while that, you could argue, was unprecedented to a certain degree, it's not totally unprecedented. That was Calmegi's track. It's not totally unprecedented to see the Philippines really get hit hard by tropical cyclones in the November timeframe. And so, of course, Fung-wong is nowhere near a high in Category 5 sort of strength, but past storms have been. And the reason this is important to note is because other Northern Hemisphere basins like the North Atlantic and the East Pacific, they really, most years, tend to wind down pretty dramatically once you get into November, but not the West Pacific. The West Pacific is a whole different animal in this category, and they continue to retain, the basin continues to retain the ability to create very powerful and potentially catastrophic storms, especially for the Philippines in the month of November. Here, this satellite loop is Super Typhoon Goni Raleigh, one of the strongest landfalling tropical cyclones in world history. Made a direct hit right there, as you can see, on Catanduanes Island on October 31st or November 1st, depending on your time zone, 2020, 5 years ago. So that was a late season system. And then here, of course, the one and only, the infamous Super Typhoon Haiyan Yolanda, the worst typhoon in Philippine history, making landfall literally almost 12 years to the day. The landfall occurred November 7th to 8th, again, depending on the time zone, but November 7th to 8th, 2013. So literally, we're just one day off of that. We just had the anniversary of Typhoon Haiyan Yolanda's landfall across the island of Leyte, which you are seeing right there on your screen. So November, historically, between all those 3 examples I just showed you, and then again this year, with the landfall, with the devastating landfall of Calmegi earlier in Cebu Island, it just goes to show how prevalent the tropical cyclone threat for the Philippines is during this time of the year, when other basins in the Northern Hemisphere are usually winding down pretty quickly. So winding back this satellite loop a little bit. For the last 6 hours. Because if you're tuning in now and you weren't here earlier, we'll leave it on infrared. This was the landfall of Typhoon Fung-wong in Luzon. Because of the mountainous terrain of Luzon, the system really kind of imploded and collapsed in on itself at the point of landfall, so not terribly well organized, but still packed a punch. And the violent sea swells, tidal surges, and coastal storm surge are the big story here today. In Aurora and Isabella, those coastlines in Luzon, they have faced some huge waves that have come crashing across these beaches in a very dangerous and potentially life-threatening way. And if you haven't seen some of that footage, we've reposted a lot of it on our X feed at Backperch Crew. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out there. Fung-wong now weakening dramatically as expected as she tramples through Luzon. And the island's mountainous terrain really tears her structure apart. Let's see any other updates and reports on the ground here. But that was landfall right there, encompassed in that satellite loop. Oh, here we go. We've got a post from Pope Leo, from the Pope, commenting, I express my closeness to the people of the Philippines who have been hit by a violent typhoon. I pray for the deceased and their families as well as for the injured and displaced. So that message from the Pope just now. This is a major story, no doubt about it, unfolding here today. Typhoon Fung-wong making landfall just 5 days after Kalmegi took over 240 lives, tragically, in Cebu, on Cebu Island, mostly in Cebu City, where a flash flood of the Mananga River washed whole portions of Talisay City, which is kind of a subdivision of Cebu City, literally swept a whole portion of Talisay City into the sea. 240 plus lives lost. Another 130, 140 people still labeled missing. Terrible situation there. Pinakanawan River in Cagayan is overflowing. So there's a result of rain-related impacts that we're seeing. Widespread power outages now taking place across Luzon, as you would expect. That is also probably why we're kind of now starting to get a lull in the reports, the real-time reports of the damage and the impacts and the real-time conditions. Because people are losing power, they're losing internet access. There's so much dust on my computer because of the strong winter winds here. These are cold front winter winds here because I'm streaming in South Texas outside.
Post from ABS-CBN News. Scattered logs, bamboo, and various broken items are strewn
Reposting a video here from the Philippine News Agency of massive tidal flooding on the coastline of Isabela, occurring long before the strongest winds came on shore there in Isabela, which was just north of Fung-wong's landfall location and therefore dead center for the most severe and potent push of onshore winds. And that, of course, is where you would see the most storm surge and the biggest waves. So that's a really crazy video right there. That happened about 6 hours ago, 7 hours ago, right before sunset there in the Philippines. But I do think we're seeing a bit of a slowdown here with the reports coming in because people are losing power and they're losing internet access.
Reports from @News5PH. Flooding due to Super Typhoon Uwan. The flooding in Hermosa Street in Manila is about 2 feet deep due to the bad weather brought by Super Typhoon Uwan this Sunday.
Sean, one of our regulars, says hi. I see you're outside. Yes, we have debuted the outdoor studio. I have mixed feelings about it though, because it is very cold right now, and it is very, very windy, as you can hear. We had a few gusts earlier, Sean, that were so big. I mean, there's dust covered all over my laptop. We're out here in the South Texas desert, basically. Don't let these trees deceive you. It's basically a desert out here. And we were in like a full-on dust storm a couple minutes ago. Pillows are flying at me, all this stuff. Yeah, so if you're just tuning in here, like Sean is, we've been live for when we started this stream, Fung-wong was a 130 mile per hour category 4. That was her peak intensity, 130 mile per hour and 943 millibars. In just this short duration, how long have we been live for? 2 hours, 15 minutes? In just that short duration, the extremely mountainous terrain of Luzon has absolutely destroyed Fung-wong, as expected, as we always expect when a typhoon hits this area of the Philippines. Has absolutely destroyed Fung-wong's structure and weakened her very rapidly. She's now down, unofficially, my estimate, to a Category 2 strength storm with winds of roughly 110 miles per hour and a pressure approximately 950 millibars. And I'm going to keep unofficially updating that to reflect the ongoing weakening trends we're seeing. Still a powerful storm now, pretty much dead center over the island of Luzon. Here you can see the center of low pressure now, basically directly, oh wait, I didn't mean to play it. Whoops. Basically directly over the town of Bambang right now. And we are definitely seeing that pressure, that estimated pressure, start to come up. But this is a really good representation of where that center of, basically where the eye is, because we can't see the eye, in case you haven't noticed. We can no longer see the eye of Fung-wong because it's gone structurally. It's been completely obliterated by these mountains, and so all the convection is jumbled and messed up, and everything is just one big hodgepodge kind of mixing pot of thunderstorms that's lacking any defined structure. So I'm going to this because it's really good in showing you where the center of the storm is right now. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Where the center of the storm is right now, and also where the flow of winds are occurring. So far what we've seen some crazy footage out of Duane's Island earlier, which is way to the southeast of what you're seeing here. Duane's Island, they didn't get a landfall, but they got into the eye wall of Fung-wong for a while. And then we also saw a lot of reports coming out of northern Aurora, the northern Aurora area, right here, and then the Isabella coastline of Luzon. That's where some of the most harrowing reports and footage of tidal surge, storm surge flooding, and waves crashing into shore. That's where most of it has come from. Just to the north of where the storm made landfall, where the storm center made landfall, because just to the north of the eye is where the winds are pushing directly on shore, so that's where you're going to get the most storm surge and the biggest winds. Now we're seeing that flurry and reports of information kind of tailing off now as more and more people lose power across Luzon. Luckily, Fung-wong is not a storm that's going to cause like long-term catastrophic infrastructure damage to the island. But temporary widespread power outages, oh yeah. And that's what's taking place right now. (9:30 a.m. here in Texas, almost 11:30 p.m. in the Philippines. And it is going to be a pretty long night ahead for a lot of areas in the northern Philippines tonight. You're looking at a long night for many locations without electricity, without power. And in other areas, maybe a long night where you're experiencing flooding, or there are floodwaters at the very minimum, at least nearby. But that right there is where the eye is, basically. Basically over Ban Bang right now. As it turns out, the southern trend did not hold with Typhoon Fung-wong. She did not get closer to Manila. So Manila and Quezon City, they avoided the worst of the winds. But definitely seeing the information tail off a little bit here because of the power outages. Also, James Reynolds, who is one of our storm chasers on the ground, really at ground zero for this storm, he said he was taking a break, getting some rest, and then continuing coverage in the morning, Philippines time. So no more new information from him either.
Post from @Weather Monitor. Current visuals from Boracay Clan Province, Philippines, show intense winds and heavy rainfall as Typhoon Fung-wong affects the area.
So there, an unofficial back perch weather update here at 9:30 a.m., 11:30 p.m. Philippines time. Typhoon Fung-wong still a powerful storm as she barrels across, crawls across the mountainous terrain of Luzon. Sustained winds approximately somewhere around 105 miles per hour still, and a pressure up to 955 millibars. The eye is approximately over the towns of Bayambong, Kasabu, Eritao. This is where some of the lowest sea level pressures are potentially being recorded. Santiago, Madela, Eritao, Lamut, Continuing to see heavy rainfall accumulations. So we got to keep staying vigilant and watching out for that flash flood potential, especially with all this mountain terrain. That's always a concern for the Philippines. That's one of their most vulnerable avenues when it comes to tropical cyclone impacts, rain-related impacts. But yeah, just some really insane videos. Most of them were taken before the typhoon made landfall. Most of them were taken before sunset here tonight in the Philippines. And I am, of course, referring to the storm chaser videos of the massive tidal waves crashing into the Aurora and Isabella coastlines. Really large storms like Fung-wong can really generate massive oceanic movement. They can really churn up massive waves. You can see that here on this approximate delineation of where these wave heights are. Starting to come down a little bit from their peak now as Fung-wong weakens and moves inland, but still some very high and dangerous potential crests crashing ashore here. This is the Isabella coastline, 30 foot plus wave crest, almost 11 meters. Again, that's an approximation. It's basically giving you an idea. Man. What a crazy day. What a crazy last several hours. And it's so unfortunate that we're witnessing another typhoon landfall here in the Philippines just 5 days after disaster, after Typhoon Kalmegi disastrously flooded Cebu Island, further south in the archipelago.
From Pat JN Typhoons Kalmegi and Fung-wong resulted in some cooling of the sea surface temperatures in the Philippine Sea over the past week. However, sea surface temperatures remain warmer than usual.
I wonder if I could see that here. Probably not. I'm not sure if this is going to be updated enough. But that was already hearing about the cool wake that Fung-wong has left in the Philippine Sea, which would obviously be no surprise. Yeah, though this isn't updated enough to see that, though. Yeah. Why is it rewinding me? Okay. Now, when we look at this, the eye of Fung-wong, or whatever's left of it, is not all that far away from entering the South China Sea and leaving Luzon. So a pretty fast-moving system. Again, this is a pressure map, so there you can see the low pressure center. Continuing to progress to the west now over Baguio, Atok, areas like that. Soon going to enter the South China Sea. So, with the power outages spreading across Luzon, since Fung-wong is really tearing through the core of the island and subjecting a lot of people to very strong winds, power outages are going down, internet access is being lost. So our reports, our real-time reports and videos coming out of what's going on in the ground are kind of tapering off. So with that, all things considered, I think I will wrap up our live coverage here today of Typhoon Fung-wong's landfall in Luzon, but we have definitely seen some crazy footage, and this is not going to conclude our live coverage in general. We, of course, will continue to keep posting very frequent updates on the situation, all the news reports coming out of Philippines, especially here, as the situation's still ongoing, but also in the aftermath on our X feed. That's at Backperch Crew. Follow us there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, for commenting on the stream, for liking the stream, and for sharing it. Woo! One last big gust here. Yeah, long day, and still lots to come. Wow. All right. I guess I better end this pretty soon before the wind blows down my entire setup. So yeah, anyway, again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Hopefully the damage come daylight, it's about to be a very long night for Luzon. Hopefully the damage come sunrise isn't too terrible. It's certainly the last thing the Philippines needs after the disaster of Typhoon Kalmegi in the south over Cebu Island. So, you know, fingers crossed, hopefully everyone's okay and the damage is as minimal as it possibly can be. But we will keep an eye on that. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again soon.